PHA, it's pre-health. Yeah, being recorded. Pre-health advising prepare committee lecture series. Our first two lectures in the previous weeks were on MCAT tips and tricks and the timeline for the application process. And this week, brought to you by me, Ahmed, and Sejal and Rachel. We'll be discussing clinical leadership and volunteering experiences, how to get involved with them, why are they important, and our own personal experiences with them as well. So as people start coming in, we'll just continue to focus on these sort of experiences. And this is a sort of guideline for today's lecture. First, we'll be focusing on clinical. Second, we'll be looking at leadership, following by volunteering. And last of all, we'll be looking at the conclusion, the main takeaways, and most importantly, time for questions. First of all, clinical experience. What is it? Why do you guys think it would be important? Just like a very brief, if anyone would unmute themselves for maybe like a couple of seconds, very brief outline, like why you think clinical experience is important, and even maybe like a definition of what a clinical experience entails. If you don't want to unmute yourself, you can also type it in the chat, just something very brief.
Like any experience in like a medical or whatever field you're interested in, like a professional setting, like in healthcare, and like just like it's important because it gives you like real life experience into that, because we don't really get that through like our classes and stuff.
Yeah, thank you for that, Madison. You pretty much you said it right. So clinical experience is that sort of experience that you are placed in a healthcare setting, you are working directly with patients, and most importantly, you get to learn about the different aspects of healthcare. So for example, here I have clinical experience. You get to learn more about different health professions, determine whether healthcare is right for you. A lot of students coming into college, a great time for exploration, are not exactly sure whether they want to be pre-health and whether pre-health is the right thing for them. So having that clinical experience gives you that sort of insight, like, is this really what I want to do? And also, clinical experience provides you with a great opportunity to demonstrate commitment to pursuing a healthcare profession, whether that's, shadowing at a clinic or shadowing at a dentist's office. Any sort of opportunity like that does really show commitment to pursuing that profession in the future. It is also important for learning, like the day-to-day routine, like ins and out of a healthcare professional, especially if you're working directly with one-on-one with a certain, with a specific healthcare professional, and you get to see some of the unspoken things related to the field. I think that's also pretty important to keep in mind. So, we say clinical experience, but again, that takes on so many different forms, so many different shapes. So what are some examples? The things you could do, like I mentioned already, shadowing. You have hospice care, you have being a certified nursing assistant, you could be a volunteer EMT, medical scribing, healthcare interpreters. Then there's also volunteering within a clinical setting. That there's a whole different range there. Just a brief introduction to each of these. Shadowing is pretty much your day-to-day, just like walking around, like following, listening, learning, being that second hand to a physician, but not exactly dealing directly with patients in a one-on-one setting. You will gain exposure to many specialties as you do work closely with mainly one professional. Hospice care is great for understanding the emotional toll of caring for older and mainly dying patients, and that's something that a lot of incoming medical students really appreciate. Being a certified nursing assistant is great since it's a paid position, flexible hours, and you also get that experience in clinical settings. As specifically if you're interested in a nursing track, volunteer EMTs are more working within your local community. You get to become aware of the sort of environment in your community. What is the healthcare like? What are the medical conditions that many of the greater population in your community generally suffers from? You get a lot more hands-on experience and quick on your feet. You got to think quickly as well. Medical scribing is a sort of oral and written communication These are the skills that you're building, and you work on a team with healthcare providers. So it gives you insight into how that team works. It's not just, at any healthcare provider team, it's not just a doctor and, some nurses, things like that. There is a whole team to it. And you coming in as a scribe builds that oral written communication as you follow around a doctor and pretty much scribe the notes that a doctor, is consulting with their patient. Healthcare interpreters focus mainly on limited English proficiency, and for example, patients that are limited in their English pretty much. So English as a second language patients, or even patients that are deaf and hard of hearing. And volunteering is pretty much probably the most versatile of all these, where it's pretty much just giving back to a community you're part of, but mainly at the clinical setting. And that can take on many shapes and forms. Through Emory, or on campus in the Atlanta area, these are the potential opportunities for shadowing, for scribing, for all these different things. These are all can all be found in the Emory Pre-Health Advising website. And a lot of our pre-health advising peer mentors actually have experience at working at most, if not all, these places. And that has been one of the great things about being here in Emory, being here at Atlanta, is taking advantage of those resources. But most importantly, when it comes to clinical experience, you do want to focus on you making it as personal as possible. You don't want to join a clinical experience or start shadowing a doctor because you think it'll look good, but rather you should focus on what you personally will take away from it. Not just what you will personally take away from it, but also why is this meaningful to you and to your future career goals as a healthcare professional. So specifically between me, Sejal, and Rachel, we've all, these are our personal clinical experiences. And I'll go ahead and start in explaining some of what I do. I do clinical research through the School of Medicine. I look at through an immunology lab. I work for I volunteer at the Shifa Free Clinic in Duluth, where I cater towards underserved and underinsured/uninsured communities. The health fairs through the Islamic Center of North America as well. I intern at the Marcus Autism Center, where I specifically work with the autistic children in PHA. And I have also shadowed in Dubai, where I currently reside. Rachel, would you like to share with us?
Yeah, sure. So recently this year, I started volunteering with Clarkston Community Clinic. It's actually a refugee clinic about 20 minutes from Emory, and it's on the slide that Ahmed just showed before this, one of the opportunities that Emory lets us know about. So you kind of work and help take vitals, patient history, things like that with refugee patients. And then something else that I did earlier on was PHA, and I tried Winship as well. I thought they were all great experiences in different clinical settings. With PHA, I did the art cart. So I was doing arts and crafts with small children. And then that was a great experience. It's very different from Clarkston, and it was also very different from Winship. Winship was more where you're sitting in a waiting room with cancer patients, asking them about their day and how they've been. I also volunteer at a hospice/memory care facility called Orchards, and there I teach Bhangra dance classes to them, and also get a chance to talk to the different residents there and shadow the nurses there as well. Earlier at Emory during my freshman year, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Medical Brigade program, where there's a trip to Honduras to spend a week with different patients and residents over there and help them and triage them. And then finally, there's shadowing, as Ahmed was talking about, and that can be in any local hospital. So I tend to do that when I'm at home, and there's more hospitals that I had connected with throughout middle and high school. And then Sejal, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. So my experience is actually pretty different from what both Rachel and Ahmed said. I would say my main form of clinical experience has been medical scribing. So this worked well for me during this past year during quarantine, I basically did half of my classes, like, or half my, sorry, my schedule itself, I did half of it with classes, and then I would work part-time as a medical scribe during like the spring semester when we really didn't have as much like priority to coming to campus and stuff like that. I will say personally, being a medical scribe or some of the things that Ahmed talked about, it's definitely a big time commitment. It's not something that you probably can do during a regular semester with lots of classes and extracurriculars. So I would be wary about, you know, how you're prioritizing your time with that. But to me personally, I think medical scribing, especially in a pediatrics clinic, was super rewarding just because that is something that I want to do with the rest of my life. And I was able to see from a firsthand experience like pediatrics patients, and then also kind of like following around a pediatrician, but working hands-on was just something pretty meaningful in my experience. And then something else that I did was also going to Wesley Woods. I worked with some of the residents there, basically, especially with the CNAs, kind of just working with like administering drugs as well as like various types of medications and food and stuff like that. So I think honestly, clinical experience is really what you make of it. Like any of these experiences are definitely valid. But it's like what you really prioritize and what you just kind of appreciate throughout this process. So
This is actually just to like wrap up our clinical section. This is a quote straight from the AAMC website, and it says here, no matter how you choose to gain clinical experience, it's important to remember quality is more important than quantity. Admissions officers want you to not only show depth of experience and a longitudinal commitment to the work you choose, but also to be able to articulate how your medical exposure has informed your motivation for a career in medicine. And that pretty much sums up, you know, everything we've discussed so far. It's all about what importance does the experience that you take on play in your life, and how does it play a role in the motivation for your career in medicine. And Rachel will discuss our leadership.
Sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about leadership experience at Emory, how you can get these type of positions. And this all kind of goes back to that important quote that Ahmed was just talking about, and it's all about really focusing on the quality of the organization. So you don't need 2+ different types of leadership positions. You just need to get very involved with organizations that mean the most to you. So just as the slide says, it's really important for you to figure out what your passions are and your interests, and maybe gain a leadership position in something that really affects you and affects your time at Emory. So these leadership positions show evidence that you're a team player, they have strong communication skills, and what it's important is you really will come out of these leadership positions with certain skills that will really help you in a future like healthcare career, such as collaborating with others, or just as the slide says, communicating with them as well. Okay, so to kind of focus on the different types of leadership positions you can attain, one big one is campus life. So I think we can each talk about this a little bit later on, but there's residence life, orientation leader, or tour guide opportunities. And even within residence life, you know, you can have RHA, sophomore advisor, or residential advisor positions. You have pre-professional societies, so AK Psi, Phi DE, and these other ones here as well. The cultural ones are all listed here as well. You can get a leadership position. There's also cultural dance teams or things like that where you can attain leadership positions as well. Then you can have religious or faith-based leadership positions, sports, and Greek life. And then we'll talk about our personal leadership positions in a second, which will probably go more in depth into these specific categories, but here are just some ideas. If you don't know where to start, you can kind of figure out maybe one of these categories means a lot to you, and that can kind of be one that you focus on and eventually attain a leadership position. Okay, so this word is up here because we really want you to have to pick some type of organization that's really the most meaningful for you. To me, that is dance on campus. So excuse me, as a freshman, I joined a dance team, but I didn't really decide to become a captain of a dance team until junior or senior year because I knew that this experience was really meaningful to me. So it's all about probably figuring out what you enjoy most at Emory, and that could be a sports team. It could be a clinical volunteering organization that we have on campus. So it can really be anything that's important to you. Okay, so how to get more involved and get these leadership positions? First of all, go to the events. So anyone in the organization or in the club wants to know that you're going to be a committed member of that organization. So try your best to reach out to them, go to their monthly meetings, get to know maybe people in the organization as well, see what their purpose is and if your mission or goal aligns with what the club does. Asking questions is really important because that shows you're interested. So when is the event or how can I join the organization? You don't always have to look for a leadership opportunity first. Sometimes those will just kind of arise while you're in an organization. So that happens over time. Eventually you can apply for exec. So I think it's always important to have a little bit of experience within an organization before you decide to apply to exec, because that'll especially make your application a little bit stronger using personal experiences. And then you want to lead initiatives. So work with others, plan events, and brainstorm ideas. So kind of go out of your way to show other people that you're interested in creating programs or being a part of this organization to maybe make a difference. Okay, here are some really important tips that I feel have helped me as I've gotten leadership positions over the years. Don't just join an exec position because it's open. There's a lot of times that you will see that there is students leaving and there's going to be open positions, but you really want to join something because you think that you're going to have a meaningful experience from it. Join a leadership role for when it feels right. For a few clubs, I waited until senior year. So this is really important because a lot of students will come in wanting a leadership position like right off the bat freshman year. And sometimes it can be really overwhelming. There's certain times where it's probably right for you to get a president position or vice president or something like that. And whenever that time comes, like I think you'll really enjoy the position the most. Apply to exec because you want to stay in this position. So you want to make sure you really want to commit to this organization and then not become an exec board member sophomore year and then end up dropping the club junior year. So make sure you kind of figure out the few clubs that you really want to stay in throughout your undergrad experience and then build leadership positions in those. The last one is demonstrate commitment, show confidence, and be proactive. Being proactive is pretty important with leadership positions because sometimes it is hard to get certain ones of really like popular organizations among students. So reaching out early, getting to know what the position might entail might all be important. Okay. I'll talk a little bit about my personal, sorry, Ahmed, can you go?
Yeah, are you okay, Rachel? Yeah, like Rachel was discussing, we all have different experiences within leadership, and we've all taken on those different types of organizations as we outlined earlier. For me personally, I've become the vice president of finance for the Phi Delta Epsilon, the pre-med or the international medical fraternity on campus. Through this position, I've been able to work and actually orchestrate our main fundraiser, which happened this past week, actually, Stand for the Kids, through the Children's Miracle Network of hospitals. And we were able to raise about $2,000 for children at CHOA. And it's been a pleasure working with everyone through that position. I've also become vice president of the Arab Cultural Association. I'm actually wearing the hoodie right now. Rep the Cultural Association that I'm proud. It's been a home away from home for me. I live across in the Middle East, and having a second home or a community that I can relate to through a cultural identity has been an important part of my Emory experience so far. I'm currently the treasurer for the Education and Medical Emergencies organization, and it's been honestly amazing so far. Reaching out to people, teaching them how to do CPR, splinting, suturing, things like that, and it's been a great, like we say, education in medical emergencies. Being an RA is probably, I'm currently an RA in Raul. So if you're not sure what Raul is, one of our freshman dorms on campus. Being an RA is probably one of my most meaningful experiences, having that one-on-one interaction with community and having a transition or helping residents with their transition into college. Seeing them grow from the first day they move in to even now, we've only been here for about 2 months for them, but honestly, seeing them grow is something that I honestly live for. And I've also been very, very lucky to be a PHA peer mentor. I can put on events like this, reach out to pre-health students and help them, navigate their pre-health careers the same way I had previous mentors reach out to me and navigate those as well. And next semester I'll be an Anthro 333. That's the Human Disease and Behavior TA. And I hope to see you guys in that class. Rachel, I hope you're doing all right now. You can you can talk a little bit more about your experiences.
Actually, yes, I think I can go now. I think I'm good. So a few of my leadership experiences. The first one is Karma Dance Captain. This is pretty different from any of the other extracurriculars that I do. It's all about like choreographing different dances and leading performances around campus and off campus for competitions as well. I feel like it really gives me a break from clinical volunteering and like different academic organizations that I'm involved with. So I really enjoy that. Just like Ahmed, I'm also an RA at the upperclassmen Claremont campus. And I was an RA last year, and then I was an SA on campus my sophomore year. So I really feel like residence life has been a big part of my Emory experience as well. Just interacting with the different students and planning programs has been something that I really enjoy doing. Being a student ambassador, which is just basically being a tour guide, and that's something I just started this year as well. I find it really fun to kind of welcome students onto campus that are excited to learn about Emory. And this is a great leadership opportunity if you like talking to other people, you have experiences that you want to talk about during your time at Emory as well. I'm currently a Intro Bio 141 TA this year. This is my first time being a teaching assistant, and I think it's really cool to like be able to have your own sessions outside of class and teach students and be able to work with them. And then finally being a PHA mentor as well.
Alrighty, I can go. So kind of like some of the clinical stuff, I feel like I have a lot of different stuff from Rachel and Ahmed, but that kind of makes the leadership versatility aspect a little bit better, in my opinion. So just to talk about some of my own leadership experiences, the first thing that I have, or like the first thing that I wrote down here, was being president of a club that I founded. So honestly, I think this was a pretty monumental experience for me, just because I was able to kind of channel some of my passions into an organization on campus and, work with other talented students and like faculty to kind of bring that from the ground up. So having that leadership experience, especially early on, and then continuing that up to my junior year has been pretty nice, I would say. Another organization that I'm part of is RHA. So RHA is just like the Residence Hall Association that a lot of first years, they're super involved with it, I would say. So RHA was something that I started my freshman year, and it was something that I stayed in throughout my freshman, sophomore, as well as my junior year. And I think the commitment to the organization was important from the beginning, because that allowed me to like work with exec and then eventually become exec myself. And then another thing that I'm involved with is the orientation leader program. So again, that's super first year oriented, but I think working with first years through things like RHA, as well as the journal club, as well as an orientation leader, they've just really helped me build connections and kind of give back to a community that I was definitely part of. Like when I first came to Emory, being from super far away from like Atlanta and Emory and stuff like that, I think it was nice to give back to that position as an orientation leader, especially this year. Let's see, another thing is being a chem lab TA. So this was something that I also did my spring semester, and just having that experience of being a TA for a year now, I think that's been good, because some of the other things we talked about have been more of like a res life perspective with orientation leader and RHA, but kind of in the academic setting of gaining leadership experience can also be important, I would say too, especially in the future if you want things like rec letters from professors. You know, TAing is always like a good opportunity for that. And then finally, like Rachel and Ahmed, I would say PHA has been a really monumental experience, just like working with the pre-health advising office as well as other mentors, just because like this will be our future career path. And I think gaining a more insightful experience into that has been super nice. Okay, and then finally, we're going to talk about some volunteering experiences at Emory. So kind of titled this slide, just like making the most of your time at Emory. I would say volunteering is a super important extracurricular, just because your time at Emory is not going to just be boiled down to the academics. You want to actually be involved with your community. So the helping aspect of that, I would say that's very essential if you want to do anything in like a healthcare profession. Your entire career path is going to be devoted to helping different populations and communities and stuff like that. So you want to gain that experience early on with stuff like volunteering. And then in addition, it just simply shows your initiative and your passion for the career itself. And then working with communities such as like the community in Atlanta, which we're all part of at this point, as well as communities back home, as well as communities that we identify with. I think that just gives you a more meaningful, perspective as to what your future healthcare career path will be. So, in addition, I think that volunteering is super, super important, because this doesn't even go like specifically to like a healthcare profession, but in any profession, and just like as a human being, you have to have skills like empathy and compassion. And I think that volunteering definitely builds those skills from an early perspective. You have to be an empathetic individual if you're going to want to connect with people and work with different populations, especially populations that you may not be directly a part of. You still need to know how to recognize some of their plights so you can solve those problems. And in addition, you have to be a compassionate individual, I would say, just so you can empathize, right, with those populations. Okay, so some of the opportunities for volunteering, we kind of talked about this before, and you can find all of these links and stuff like that in the pre-health advising website for Emory. But I would say these volunteer opportunities, especially the first part with like the local, national, and international service opportunities, those are some things that are not necessarily clinical, which is, non-clinical experience is also extremely important if you're going to apply to like grad school or med school or something like that, just because I would say you wouldn't want your entire application to just have like one perspective. You want to show your, grad school that you are a multifaceted individual, and doing other volunteer opportunities would definitely show that. So we have some things here like Volunteer Emory, which is a great organization that, connects you directly to organizations as well as communities in Atlanta. And then I think it's nice that the pre-health advising website, they kind of linked you directly to organizations in Atlanta, like Hands On Atlanta, and just other websites where you can search like volunteer opportunities that you want. And then we already talked about this, but the clinical volunteer opportunities are also things that you can explore because they all go into that umbrella term of volunteering at Emory. Okay, so I kind of hinted at this just a second ago, but there definitely is a difference between clinical volunteering versus like regular volunteering opportunities. So we, definitely touched on all the clinical stuff before, but in terms of regular volunteering opportunities, that's basically everything that's not, so everything that doesn't occur within like a medical setting, a clinical setting. So some personal experiences that the three of us have, I'll just like run through that at the top. So it's like teaching dance classes at a hospice that Rachel talked about, or spending time with residents at a memory care facility, or tutoring local elementary, middle school students on Zoom. So just like experiences that are not necessarily healthcare related, but they still impact the larger community, and that's equally important for your application. So some personal volunteering initiatives that you can do at Emory, we have a few examples here. So one is Project Shine, which is an organization where you can tutor students at schools for the SAT and ACT. Camp Kesem, which is an organization that provides support for children whose parents have been affected, diagnosed with cancer. And then Best Buddies is also an organization that creates opportunities for friendships with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which is like IDD. And then just like things like participating in food drives, which is something that occurs at Grady. So by no means is this like exhaustive, but there's a lot of volunteer opportunities that you can be a part of at Emory as well as back home, anything like that. So, okay. We can go in the same order as before. So, Ahmed, if you want to talk about some of your volunteering personal experiences, that'd be great.
Yeah, so some of my experiences have kind of gone hand in hand with what I really appreciate or what I really feel meaningful to me. So like I mentioned earlier, I have some clinical volunteering experiences, such as working with underserved communities that lack access to healthcare through the Shifa Free Clinic. I've been able to volunteer with like triaging, checking vitals. I've even scribed a little. Like there's a lot of versatility there through the clinic. But I've also volunteered my time in in educating a lot of these underserved community members on the importance of healthcare and more recently, the importance of getting vaccinated for COVID-19. Through the Marcus Autism Center, I've been volunteering my time and helping with the development and the applied behavior therapy for a lot of the autistic children at CHOA. I've been teaching English to ESL students here at the Atlanta community through a program called Outreach. And I've also been tutoring high school students as well in the Atlanta community through some like third-party organizations, like through online tutoring. And Project Downtown is something I've been doing since my freshman year, where where here on Emory's campus we package sandwiches and like meals for homeless people here in Atlanta, and we distribute them in downtown Atlanta. Being an SA last year during COVID times was a big volunteering experience where I was not being compensated for any of the work I was doing in the community building and building that the helping assisting RAs with the facilitation of first year transition. And honestly, the culmination or the combination of all these experiences together has shaped my professional interest as well. Catering to underserved communities is something that I'm very passionate about, and I will try to continue as much as possible. And in fact, like that is what my future career is centered around. And I'm sure what you'll find is a lot of people will tend to volunteer in things that are meaningful to them. Specifically, teaching English to ESL students is something more meaningful to me than it may be for someone else, specifically because I was once an ESL student. I immigrated here at the age of 4, and I did not speak English. I was enrolled in ESL classes in school, And eventually I was able to overcome that and integrate within a regular public school setting. And having someone to help with, teaching English there was very meaningful for me growing up. So the only way for me to give back to the community, as we mentioned earlier, that is like the importance of it all, is to go back and do the same for someone that was once in my shoes. Yeah. Rachel, what do you got to say? Oh.
Yeah. So these are the different things I'm currently volunteering with, but to talk about some of my past experiences first, I was also an SA at Eagle Hall, and that's kind of what first pushed me into residence life. I just had a really good time creating creative types of programs and working with the RAs. And it is basically like a continuous volunteering opportunity because you're not really getting compensated for any of that. So you're kind of interacting with first year students on your own time and making them feel more comfortable with their transition. And then the hospice volunteering that I do, the dance classes aren't really a specific clinical type of volunteering just because I'm choreographing and teaching dances on my own time. And then sometimes we do arts and crafts in the facility as well. The Clarkston Community Clinic is one of my more clinical volunteering personal experiences that I talked about earlier. And then the crisis text line is actually something that I started doing right during when the pandemic started. So it's a texting platform where anyone in a crisis or someone currently having any mental health crisis can reach out 24/7 and have someone to talk to. And this was a really different type of experience for me because it was a completely one-on-one individual experience where you could have an actual conversation with someone and understand everything about what they're feeling, help them find a solution. So it was a really rewarding experience, and it's kind of completely on your own time. The entire thing is virtual. So whenever you have a chance, you can just go onto the platform and start communicating with someone. So all of these personal experiences have been different volunteering things that I've joined over the past few years.
Okay, and just to talk a little bit about my personal experiences. So yeah, I also forgot to put something on here, but one of my monumental, I would say, volunteer experiences before school started was being an orientation leader. I think that was pretty taxing work because we also don't get paid for that, but it was definitely a good volunteering experience just because I worked with so many other people whose like main goal was just to make the transition to Emory smoother. And I think that's a lot what Res Life does too, right? Like being that constant support for students who don't necessarily always have that. So that definitely counts as pretty meaningful volunteer experience. And then some of the things that I have actually on the slide here. So I've worked with Project Sunshine, which is basically an organization that works with pediatric patients who are currently in hospitals. And I've served as the chapter leader for that in Atlanta. So our main hospital has been PHA. And basically that's been a good volunteering experience in my opinion, just because, as I kind of said before with like the scribing and stuff, I want to do, something related to pediatrics. So finding a volunteer experience that very directly correlates, especially to our community and like the pediatrics hospital here, has been nice. And then in addition, just tutoring, that's been something that I do. It's been, I would say, about a year now, just like on a weekly basis, just tutoring elementary and middle school students in math or just like whatever they need. So I think that's been a nice break from school just because you're surrounded by so many college students and classes can be, have like difficult content, but sometimes just like going back to your roots, tutoring kids in like basic math has just been, it's been a nice relaxation thing. And it also definitely counts as meaningful volunteer experience, especially if, you're passionate about helping kids or like communities that don't have that support, especially with, their own education and schooling and stuff like that. And then I kind of talked about this before as well, but with Wesley Woods and actually just going in, talking to like senior citizens there has been a nice experience. Sometimes it's just really about sitting down with communities and populations and, some of the conversations that you actually get from volunteering can be the most meaningful part of, even obtaining that position. So, and I think that's something that both Ahmed and Rachel hit on too, like the conversations and just like going into your role as a volunteer. You can gain some of the most meaningful things right there. So. We kind of touched on this throughout the presentation, but I think having that personal connection, and it doesn't just have to be for volunteering, but anything you do throughout this process, I would say make it meaningful, right? Like you actually do want to enjoy the things that you're doing, and it doesn't have to feel like a chore. Like you're doing things like volunteering and clinical experiences because that's what you love, and you're gaining a lot of knowledge from that too. So, definitely a give and take with that. Okay.
Thank you for that, Sejal. Essentially here, our main takeaway messages, or the important things to keep in mind. We really want you to focus on 3 things. Quality is a lot more important than quantity. Make sure the experiences that you're taking are not just there to check a box or tick a box, or feel like you've done something well, like you're just putting it on your resume. But instead, you need to focus on what you're interested in and be reflective what you have learned through that experience. It's not important. It's not what you do, but it's why you do it and what you learn from it. I think that should be the if that's one thing you take away from all this, it's not about what you're doing. It's about why and how and what you're learning from it. That important message will like you will gain a lot more out of an experience if you maintain that approach and you are reflective of what you're learning, even from like if you did like a small volunteering, something small you did like on the weekend for like an hour. Be reflective of what you learned, like what has changed in you, why is that super meaningful to you, and how will it shape you as a person and you going forwards, specifically within a career of healthcare. So we wanted to open the floor now, most importantly, to any and all questions you guys have, whether it's related to clinical leadership, volunteering, whether it's, like figuring out like time management. Honestly, this is the time to open up about any questions you may have. And if you would like to, unmute yourself, put it in the chat. We are willing to listen and try to answer all questions you guys have.
Hi, I have a question about like clinical research and like would that like fall, or like just research in general, like would that fall under any one of these categories? And if not, like well, yeah, if it doesn't fall under these categories, like that's fine, just like, but in general about like research, like I guess what would be, because I know there are programs like SIRE and SURE to get involved with those, but I know like there are also like other ways to get involved with it. So like for clinical research, for example, like I think you said you were in it, Ahmed. Like how did you get involved with that? Just because I am in a research right now, but I'm looking to switch and I didn't know if I wanted to do it like through SIRE. So just like what are other pathways, I guess, to like, yeah, get involved with research and like clinical research specifically.
As cliche as it sounds, I was just like very relentless with like cold emailing as many like PIs as many as I could. In fact, I eventually found one that was offering a position in just patient recruitment, like literally just calling patients for clinical trials. And that's how I first started in the lab that I got, because I was able to, they actually responded to me and said, hey, we're not taking students on a research project, but instead, if you're willing to, work for us and recruit patients for our clinical trials, I did that for 5 months. And then over the summer, I went and worked in the lab, in person full time. And that was a lot more working with patient data, data entry, data analysis, and looking at like patient like medical charts. And that was all clinical. That's considered to be clinical experience because you are directly dealing with clinical data and clinical, like, yeah, I was seeing a lot of the patients coming in for, you know, them being drawn for like blood samples being drawn. You know, there was bone marrow bone marrow samples being drawn as well. And then I also was able to get the wet lab experience of processing those samples through, for example, for the clinical trial that we're looking at was the certain B cell populations within people, you know, who suffered from COVID. We call them acute COVID patients, and there's also patients that suffered for COVID or suffered post COVID through with COVID-like symptoms for maybe 6 months. So we call those long haulers. And my specific research has been figuring out some sort of characterization of B cell populations within that. So I was able to currently, to this day, I still get both the clinical and the wet lab side of it. Clinical through the patient interaction there and the patient data, whereas the wet lab is the actual like processing of the, you know, the samples. And where for some labs, again, it takes on many different forms. And it honestly depends on the certain type of researcher you'd be interested in. But SIRE and SURE I know are great programs. Another way of looking would be reaching out to professors individually, or even sorry, not professors like PIs, but also professors is what I meant. It would be a great opportunity because a lot of the professors, like classes you're taking, they know a lot more about the ongoing research in a certain department. So for example, for me, when I was interested in MBB research, I was reaching out to my MBB professors and saying, how can I get involved in MBB research? And they were the ones who actually helped me find a bunch of professors. But luckily, I found a position before having to join another lab. So I would say it definitely requires patience to, you know, getting into a certain type of lab that you're looking for. But I would also keep your interests open. I wasn't particularly like looking for a position in like an immunology slash pulmonology. But now it's become something that I'm actually like very interested in, and I'm like more and more intrigued slash like curious about it every day. And I would hope you take that similar approach as well. But if you have any specific follow-up questions related to the type of research or like a specific research within a major, you can schedule an appointment with one of the PHA peer mentors who specifically does research within, you know, a certain program or department, and they'll also help you navigate that kind of thing as well.
Okay, thank you.
And just kind of following up on that, because I know, Madison, you asked like a research specific question. So part of our lecture series, Prepare, is also going to do one very specifically oriented towards research. And that's another one that I'm going to be leading as well. It should be November 30th. So like around that Thanksgiving time, but we'll definitely like go back to the clinical aspect of research, as well as just like how to like email PIs and stuff like that, because that can be very daunting, I would say, as an underclassman. So yeah, we'll go over that stuff.
Okay, thanks.
We had another question in the chat saying, should we be tracking any volunteer hours? And honestly, yeah, you should. For the most part, you know, a lot of the long continued or, you know, extended commitment to a lot of the experiences, you'll know generally when you started, when you ended a certain volunteer experience. And part of the AAMC or AMCAS, sorry, not AMC, part of the AMCAS med school application is logging in your volunteer hours, or at least giving a rough estimate how many hours you've done. I think there's a breakdown as well. So I would say you can actually access a form through Emory's PHA website that has a chart or like a file that allows you to track those volunteer hours. And then you can use that similar approach for whether it's like clinical hours, research hours, things like that. And I think the volunteer tracking sheet also allows you it prompts you to think about what you learned specifically within that hour or 2 or 6 or 10 or how many hours you did. So it's something good to keep up and update every once in a while. Yeah.
So, we talked about like volunteering in both like the clinical aspect and then also like outside of um the clinic, and then also like how there are also volunteer opportunities like within like organizations and stuff. But would you say it's like optimal to find like a balance between like all three of those, if that makes sense?
I can talk about this a little. I do think it's really important to not only have all clinical oriented volunteering experiences. It's definitely important to have a variety of volunteering. So finding non-clinical volunteering would definitely be a good asset to your application. Um, with that being said, it doesn't need to be exactly equal. So I wouldn't say like if you have 3 clinical volunteers, you need to find like 3 non-clinical. I would just make sure you have a variety. So just different volunteering experiences that maybe are not clinical, but like would be interesting to you. I think even if it's one and it's a really quality experience that you learn a lot from, then you can have like one non-clinical volunteering experience and a few clinical.
Okay, thanks. But by like the quality, do you mean just like a one like a one-time thing, or like something that's like less commitment than like a long term?
It kind of, I would say, really depends on the experience. So for me, like the medical brigade trip that I did my freshman year, like it was only a short period of time. So it was only like 1 week of volunteering in a different country, but it was super like meaningful experience to me. I'd say that I've still talked about a lot since freshman year, and now I'm a senior, and I still think it's one of my most meaningful experiences. So in that case, I think meaningful or quality can really depend up to you, but I would say it's definitely going to be a quality experience if you've done it over like at least for a year or 6 months. That shows that you're committed to it. But even if it's a one-time thing and something that's really impacted you and you could write about it a lot, then that would also be a pretty quality experience.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
So yeah, something I wanted to add on to that is again making it as personal as much as possible it is to you. So through the free clinic that I volunteer at, and I've had a long commitment so far. I've been there for 5 months so far, and I honestly it's been great so far. But one of the best things is that I've seen patients like recurring, like coming back for different things. And not only are you have like building a stronger connection with that one person, but it's like you feel like you are connected to them. And it's not just like a one-time thing. I helped you today. We're done. We're never but then it's like you get to ask them like follow up, like, oh, how was your son? Like I know you were talking about your son like a couple of weeks ago, when I last saw you. And it's like things like that. Whereas having a week experience, not a week, like a 1 week, 2 week short-term experience allows you to have like a lot going on at once. And and that can also be really, really meaningful depending on the certain types of communities that you see. I know that there's global brigades, there's VITA as well, and they go to areas, I think in Guatemala, Costa Rica, Honduras, a bunch of other underserved communities, and they focus on providing care for like a week, 2 weeks, and it's all very like you get a lot more intense, a lot more hands-on experience rather than like a long-term commitment. So it's honestly what you make of either of the two, and it's important to actually consider like what is more appropriate for you. Can your schedule accommodate a long-term commitment, or is it something like you have a couple of weeks off in the summer, you can really like work 30, 40 hours a week on this one thing. Um, so I think it's both. Honestly, both are very, very appreciated, and both will make a difference to you as long as they are like meaningful, something that you take away that importance of it. Um, so definitely keep that in mind.
Thank you. Also, another thing I was wondering is like I know like I don't know if like what the exact like time breakdowns were of like the extracurriculars and things that you guys were talking about. Um, but just in general, like I guess how would you like balance all of that? Because I know like all of you guys seem like you're like very involved in like all of the three aspects, and like I don't know, like even throughout this year, just like transitioning from last year, like taking on like research and extracurriculars and stuff has just been like really hard to balance it all. So I guess like, what are some tips for that?
I can talk a little bit about this. I mean, we definitely are in a difficult situation right now. And I think some of the upperclassmen had a little leeway just because we were virtual, right? So school was not as intense back then, and actually being on campus now, you actually have to participate in so many things. So I think all of us can definitely understand how difficult, adding on volunteering and all of that can be. I would say for some things, for example, I kind of talked about this in the lecture, but with scribing, that's something that you could do like over the summer or over like a big break, if you're planning to do something like a gap year. Doing a pretty intense, like full-time commitment with a clinical experience like that, that's still showing commitment to that experience, but it's also giving you time to focus on things like academics when it matters. And then you have a huge break to also fulfill some of that clinical stuff that you should be gaining before you apply. So I think, if it's going to be like a very big experience, like being a medical assistant or a scribe, like I personally think that you should take the break, like when you actually have time to commit to something like that. But for smaller things like volunteering, especially if it's something like a weekly tutoring thing or like going down the street to Wesley Woods or to Choa, like I think it's just about like setting aside a couple hours a week and trying to see if you can handle that. And I think also volunteering at these places, like it shouldn't feel like a chore. So if it feels like you're actually doing a task and it's not rewarding, then you should also like reconsider if that volunteering opportunity makes sense at the time, right? If Ahmed and Rachel kind of want to add on to that.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, it's for me, it's been a lot harder transitioning back after being fully virtual last year and with club positions not really doing as much engagement, outreach, all that stuff. There's a lot more planning, event hosting, like a lot more things being done this year, and I was actually not anticipating that much. But something to consider is possibly taking like a lighter course load, and that's what I've been doing. Like this semester, I'm currently on 13 credits. Next semester, I'll be taking 12 credits, and I'll probably be like doing that for the rest of my time here. And that gives me time to like focus a lot more on research. I go to research, and I also do research for credit, something that you could consider as well, because that does give you a big chunk of time in your schedule, but you also get credit at the same time. So it's not like you have to make up that time by taking another class. And then even through like some of the internships through like for example the Marcus Autism Center, they have an internship that gives you credit as well. So you could be doing, so like you could be volunteering slash like getting clinical experience or both at the same time, but also getting credit for it as well. So I think that's something you could want to focus on going forwards. But planning out your semester before you get involved in a bunch of different experiences would be great as well. And limiting yourself is also an important thing. You don't want to spread yourself too thin. Luckily, that's something I've noticed that I was about to start doing at the start of the semester. Luckily, I was able to reflect, look back, and say, I won't have time to study for the MCAT if I'm like doing this, and that's something you'll have to be honest with yourself. Like, am I fully capable of taking on further and extra responsibilities? And once you realize that, like, like you're at your limit, just like stick with what you have, make sure it's meaningful, and you're not just like slacking in a bunch of different things rather than like focusing in a couple like really strong things. And that's the approach that I've been taking, and I feel like it's been pretty meaningful to me. So take from that as you want. And I'm sure Rachel has something else to say as well.
I would say, like, I really do agree with what Ahmed said. I specifically took a lighter class load as well, just to focus on clinical and volunteering different opportunities, because when I was studying for MCAT in my junior year, like, it was very hard to take on a bunch of other volunteering experiences. And that's something a lot of students will experience. So even you might realize, like, when you're studying, like, you just want to focus on studying, and you shouldn't feel bad that you're not like involved with a lot of extracurriculars at that time, because balancing all of that is tough. And I think now looking back at it, like as a senior, prioritizing your time for like different med school things essentially is really what matters. So the MCAT should get its own chunk of time. When you're doing applications, make sure like you've saved time for that too, and you don't want to spread yourself too thin, as Ahmed was saying. So a lot of the things that I'm involved with, I recently started over the summer or this year once the MCAT was out of the way. Yes.
Okay, that was really helpful. Thank you. Oh yeah, I had a question about, so like, I don't know if all of you guys are doing like research for credit or not, but like when you talk about like your credit hours and stuff, like this 12 or 13 or whatever, like include the research for credit, or is that like not counting in the research for credit?
Sorry, my mic's already on, so I'll just say briefly that it does count towards your credit hours. If you are taking it like for credit, I think some people get paid by their lab, and then in that case, it would not count as credit. I have been taking it for the past like 4 semesters now for credit, just because I felt like I spent a good enough time in the lab where it made sense for me to count it for credit. But it really depends on your major, like how many semesters of research for credit can count towards your major. So you just have to consider things like that. But for me, only 2 semesters really counted for the anthro-human bio major, but I just continued taking it for credit because my lab didn't really like pay any undergrad students. So I was like, might as well do it for credit if I'm spending the time here. And then you guys can share your experiences too.
I usually find that like, so this semester I was that's when I first started doing for credit. I said I joined over the summer. I was getting paid over the summer, and last semester I was doing virtual work online, but I was also getting paid for that. And there wasn't really like a strong commitment. But since I'm doing credit and I'm actually on a project now, there's a minimum of 12 to 15 hours a week. But honestly, a lot of the weeks I've been getting things like I've been getting hours closer to like 20 hours a week. It just depends on like the demand of your lab and being flexible. Like some weeks I have maybe 10 hours, some weeks I have, but like some weeks I have like 20. So it's not like every week it'll be the same, but also communicating with your PI is a strong thing as well. I would consider. I've been able to communicate with my PI and say like, hey, I won't come in next Monday, for example, because like I have like a biochem exam on Tuesday, things like that. And they're very flexible. It's like, oh, I'll just make up the hours like a later time during the week. And as long as you're getting the work, you'll find that a lot of PIs are very flexible and they don't really hold you to certain like, deadlines with like, they're like, oh, I just want you to like get this project up and running by like, I don't know, by the end of the month, and you have like a month to figure it out. Um, so I would say that's definitely something to consider. But when it comes to scheduling, I would assume that minimum 12 to 15 hours of research, and more importantly, talk to your major advisor as well. Like like Rachel said, how many credits will you be getting through research? How many semesters would it count for? And then would you have to do like, I don't know, would it follow up into like honors thesis senior year? Like there's so many avenues honestly with research, and that's one of the great things about research here at Emory.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just like, because right now I feel like I'm kind of in a weird position with it where I'm doing like MBB research, but I'm not doing it for credit because I got it through my like freshman, like first year seminar professor. And also like I'm not an MBB major. I'm a human health major. So it's like I'm taking like a full course load of like I think like 16 credits, but then also doing like 10 to 12 research hours outside. So it like, and I don't know if you can count like a non, like whatever your research is like outside of that for research for credit, but yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how to like build that into my schedule, if that makes sense. So I'm not like doing that on top of like a full course load of work.
I can comment a little bit about this because I actually, like my research, I've never done it for credit because it's been at the Department of Pediatrics at PHA. So I've never been able to connect that back to my major, like being a chem major and getting Chem 499 credit. Like I can't even petition for that. But I think the way that I kind of handled that was doing SHORE last summer. So I literally just did full-time research, stayed in Atlanta, and got the stipend and all of that stuff. And I think like doing it that way has just been a relief, because being full-time research, like I also have not been going in as much to the lab. Like I've been doing more literature review and like stuff online, so I don't actually have to do a lot of the wet lab stuff that I did over the summer. So potentially considering things like SURE, so you're dedicating that time, full-time research, right? And then you're not also having this full course load to also think about, kind of lightens the load a little bit, and I would say alleviates a little bit of the stress that you may be facing right now. So
Okay, thanks. And then did you do that during like the summer after your junior year, or is it after
this
your
was
sophomore year?
Yeah, so this was the summer after my sophomore year. So I actually applied to this lab like the beginning of my sophomore year, just because COVID kind of screwed up my plans with my freshman year lab. But the PI there encouraged me to apply to SURE just to see what would happen. And then I ended up getting that. But that was a good experience, because after some of the COVID regulations from the spring had lightened up for the summer, I was actually able to go into the lab and like work with the PI directly, which was nice. And then coming out of that now, like the fall semester, my junior year, I'm not going in as much, just because some of the projects and like the stuff that I was doing wrapped up at the end of the summer, but then working on more of like the technical side versus like wet lab stuff has been a break, like kind of a relief, even though like I'm still part of the lab, but it's not as much of like a mental taxation, I would say, because research can definitely be, a whole thing by itself. So yeah.
Thank you guys. That was really helpful.
Sejal and I are juniors, by the way. I feel like we should have introduced ourselves at
Okay.
the start.
Okay, yeah,
So
that makes sense.
I'm a junior majoring in MBB and minoring in neuroethics.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then I'm a junior and I'm majoring in chem, like I said, as well as minoring in soc. So
Oh, and I'm a senior majoring in anthro and human bio. And then also just to another note, if you also think of any questions like after this session, like all of us also have like office hours, so you can come to any of ours or any other pre-health mentors also. Because I know I had a lot of questions about all of these same things that would suddenly just come to my head. So there's always that option too, whenever you think of questions.
Yeah, okay, I definitely, there's like a page on the PHA website for all that.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Thank you guys for also going over time a little bit.
No, it's okay. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you. This was really helpful.
Okay.
All right.
Have a
Have a
good
good
day.
evening.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Bye.